We had a listening circle here a couple of nights ago to support people in the face of this devastation in Israel. Each of the 20 members who came spoke for a strict 3 minutes about how they're feeling. Everyone else was to supportively, non-judgmentally listen. We were not to argue or correct or respond or even refer back to what others have said. For any of you involved in our communities, you can imagine how difficult this can be. You can't argue, you can't correct. At least one person, but I think it was one person amongst that group, found it frustrating. They understandably wanted to speak for longer. I really valued it personally, and I want to tell you why. Firstly, people are feeling really bad, and they need to come together. They need to share how they're feeling, and they need to be listened to. I want to hear how you're doing and support you, at least by listening. I know that you each want to support others by asking how they are and just listening, non-judgmentally too. I'll share just a few vignettes from my listening in the circle and over the week to share some of the power of that listening, I hope, with you. And because you might find some of your feelings reflected, which could be a comfort. And the challenge will be then as now to listen without judgment and to see how that feels. One young woman, 23, a member of the community, talked tearfully about feeling alone. She went to a great university in which recent protests for Palestinian statehood veered into hatred of Jews and into what can feel like the celebration of Jewish death. On social media, she sees people refusing to call acts of terrorism. She feels people responding to them differently or seeking to justify them. And this can make one feel alone, confronting anti-Semitism. Sometimes unintended, but still there. I appreciated listening to her because she was sat next to her mother, also a member of the community, who would occasionally hold her hand while her daughter spoke and cried. And she had just done the same for her mother just beforehand, as her mother spoke about how she went to that same great university and how she's worried for her children, and how she's always had something of an imposter syndrome in her Judaism, because like so many of us, she's worried that she's somehow not Jewish enough. But now you really know you're Jewish. I was moved by mother and daughter supporting each other here in our community because we had created a supportive space. Around the circle and in our community, so many of us have an awareness of anti-Semitism that is especially painful and fraught right now. I heard in that circle experiences of anti-Semitism that I had not before. One member who is so inspiringly positive and kind that I think she holds back those experiences, talked to us about how when she was 12 and moved to a new school, she was too bright, so a few boys ganged up on her with anti-Jewish bullying. In that circle, one member talked about how she's a Shoah survivor, a Holocaust survivor, hidden during the war, her father taken and killed. And she talked about how this experience has, of course, been with her all her life, every day. And now, she said, what's happening to the Israelis and Palestinians makes those experiences even more present. Several people in the group expressed deep hurt for the murdering of Jews of our Jewish brothers and sisters, and real concern for the taking of any innocent lives, including Palestinian lives. There was a sentiment in that circle that people are sometimes not sure if this concern can also be expressed in synagogue. I spoke to one young man this week in his 20s who grew up in this community. He got in touch partly because he's working outside of London and he wants to be with his family and community in some way at this time. He explained to me he has a cousin who has been called up to Gaza. He and his family are so worried for him. And they're not hearing enough, and you can never really hear enough. He also said he has a friend who's Palestinian, a Gazan living in Gaza. He hopes and prays for him too. He first got in touch with me to say, very gently and really beautifully, that he hoped that somehow this sentiment too could be shared in our synagogue communications and spiritual leadership. So I called him, we talked on the phone. I expressed to him how I'm sometimes not sure how much people can stretch their hearts. And many in our community are in such pain, in fear for their friends' and families' lives, grieving their siblings amongst our people in Israel, furious at the terrorism and apologies for it. So I said, I don't know if right now is the time to potentially distract with arguments and fallouts to push people too far. And he very sweetly said, I so appreciate that, and I trust you. I was moved by the depth and the breadth of people's feeling in that circle and beyond. I wanted to bring some of it to you just now, to encourage you to sit and hear another's feelings and share yours, and do that without judgment or argument. Do that with support and care. People need it. I was moved by people's feelings because I was moved by them, by the people, by hearing a little of their life and what shaped them. You can hear a lot in 3 minutes as soon as you listen differently. And I heard about who they are and what they're connected to and how they feel. And look, I know there could be an argument that now is not the time somehow for feelings, listening and support, that the blood of those murdered screams out from the ground, as it does in our Torah portion, and the blood does scream out, and we can hear that. But the teaching of our Judaism is not, when confronted with pain and difficulty, to shut off or to retreat into hatred. And I get that temptation. It's especially why now is a time when you could dwell securely in your isolation or hatred, when you could be alive to your feelings and let someone else be alive to their feelings too. The teachings of our rabbis is as follows. When you're confronted with views and feelings coming at you, which may seem contradictory, make for yourself a heart of many rooms. Or in the language of a parallel text, make your ears like a funnel, and acquire for yourself an understanding heart to listen. The need is to listen to others and to make room in our hearts for their feelings and views and personhood too. Of course, when you take time to listen without judgment and make room in your heart, you see that sentiments that could seem at odds needn't be at odds at all. One can be horrified by shocking terrorist murder of young men, women, children, our hearts hurting at grandmas taken hostage, and one can be deeply concerned for any innocent lives lost. To acquire an understanding heart, we also need to be brave enough to feel what we're feeling, to take some time with that, to even share some of it too. I appreciated the last listening circle for the comfort of listening to others, but also for another reason. I felt I could share some of how I'm doing. You know, I'm a rabbi here, and I'm English as well, which sometimes means that all this week, when someone thoughtfully asks me how I'm doing, I tend to say that very English word, okay. Okay. And I would sometimes say, this is so sad, but yeah, I'm doing okay. But in that circle, I was a participant, being asked to share how I feel. So I was able to say, I'm finding this so sad. I'm finding this so difficult. It's the shock. It's the deaths and the brutality. It's how people are feeling. My family, friends, and dear teachers there, frightened, and that fear compounded by a fear for the future too, profoundly depressed. And my feelings are affected by how people are doing here too. I find purpose in supporting others. And it's a hard responsibility right now. I share this now as I did then, not so you should distract yourself with worrying about me specifically, though I know kind people afterwards, but not so you should worry about me. But I want to model something. I want to model vulnerably and with difficulty, making oneself an understanding heart, to listen. And that sometimes means listening to how we're doing too, and growing that resilience, and also listening supportively to others. We mourn for those lives that have been taken. We pray for the safe return of hostages. We think of all those living in fear right now. We think of each other, and we support each other, and we make for ourselves a heart of many rooms, growing, with space for those feeling isolated, horrified, scared, and with space for those fearing the death of innocence too. Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.